Hello. So some of you may have seen a slight performance earlier today. And the reason I've been brought to this event specifically is 6 years ago, I founded a new media studio where we primarily use the human voice, collaborate with academic research, and also really try to think about what is the function of storytelling in the integration of emerging tech. And I think it's a very natural question, what is the role of the artist in innovation? But regardless of the incredible power of a new set of tools or the objectivity of a new technology, there is a challenge in storytelling because you need a zeitgeist to have the right narratives and the right internal stories for them to lean into a technology. And I think most people in this room may have felt the burn of the wrong stories being told or specific stories being told, which really hugs the minds of how individuals approach or internalize their own attitude towards a new piece of tech. So over the last 3 or 4 years, I've primarily worked with blockchain and machine learning, and our studio became a partner with United Nations, really trying to find these artists and explore how storytelling has a very powerful impact and has a strategic leverage when it comes to integrating new technology. So as I mentioned, my world stemmed with voice and performance. And even though this is an absolute niche hyper-specialism, I rose to the top of this we'll call it a fascinating culture, and actually took a step away from music and went much more into research. So I was able to develop a series of partnerships with UCL, Harvard University, Bell Labs, Berggruen Institute, and eventually Yeff as well, when it comes to how do we tell stories around voice, but how do we actually expand human voice? What are the roles of voice outside of very hyper-specialized performance, but also our relationships, our connections, our working relationships are actually fundamentally connected to voice. And if you can innovate in voice, there's this very fascinating connection that you actually end up always rooted in human-centered design. Whether it is blockchain, spatial audio, machine learning, if you can use these technologies to unearth something or amplify a voice or make people think about this in a new way, we started to find again and again some really interesting stories started to emerge. So as an individual with my voice, thinking about specifically how I could expand technique and meeting individuals around the world, this idea of new expertise, what are the new narratives and new stories that allow people to really find the utility to expand their skills? And more specifically with AI, my journey began when I was 14 as actually a tournament chess player. And it's a very old and established narrative that game theory is a predictive framework. A lot of the things happening in that intellectual reality is a great framework to see how people will maybe overcome some of the discomforts, this idea of a centaur, an individual that really embraces a system or a technology to augment and become something more. Me growing up in a working class dynamic, a lot of my opponents as a county level chess player were middle class, and my father bought me an early chess engine. And there were sentiments even back then that I think were very needed narratives when it comes to leaning into the discomfort of technology. This system never got tired of playing me. It was something that was always there, and there was an element of self-development. So as I evolved into more of a director and as an artist, that sentiment of leaning into the discomfort has always been there. So today, what I want to share with you is 3 specific portfolio pieces that explore 3 pillars strategically that we approach emerging tech projects. And we see these kind of system and tech-based relationships as either an opposition, a mentorship, or a collaboration. And this idea, which is very established within game theory and chess, that a system will outplay you and push you, but is a form of self-development, how did that sort of implicate itself into some of our projects? So in terms of design, this idea of discomfort, this is actually a musical instrument, and there are 56 triggers on this piece. And what we did is we invited some of our favorite musicians to come along. They would plug their laptop in, and their voice or their sounds was strewn across the structure. So a musician that normally moves a certain way, has certain narratives, certain habits and behaviors, even as a professional expert musician, now had to reach, jump, and expand. When you introduce 500 individuals into that space, what you have is a terrified expert musician. So this theme of discomfort, despite it being uncomfortable and challenging, inviting different kinds of expertise to come and play, it was actually in that discomfort to do something with a new habit, with a new technology. It created a refreshed narrative, a whole new perspective for someone that had maybe spent 10,000 hours doing something. And there's a saying in chess that I think is very relevant, which is, with every success, you dip yourself in brass. And I think with a lot of the technologies that we have and a lot of the strengths that we have, we're so locked into our narratives that it's very hard to create new plasticity, but also new storytelling, new narratives that allow users and individuals to approach these technologies with an open mind. So regarding my voice specifically, I started to create these large data sets, collection hundreds of hours of voice, and over 10 hours of my own performance, shouting, screaming, phraseologies, and patterns. And this idea that a system can speak back to you, a technology can speak back to you and allow you to stand on the shoulders of that system and see further, I became very interested in how can I generate synthetic voice? What is a discomfort that I can lean into as a vocal expert that allow me to start generating new phraseologies, new patterns, and new ideas? And it was this sentiment that led to a collaboration with Bell Labs, where they commissioned an artwork, which was effectively a human-machine collaboration in this room. It used to be the quietest room in the world. It was called the room where sound goes to die. And here you see one of my idols, which is John Cage, experimenting with randomization. And this is me several years later, planning and experimenting with a work where we plan to generate what we call a second self. This agent that is able to speak back. And as someone that spent their whole life trying to sound like a machine, for the first time, with a series of collaborations stemming back from 2016, we started to be able to generate a machine that sounds like me. And it's this agent-human relationship that I think is very, very interesting, that, again, leaning into a discomfort, some very interesting things can happen. So I'm going to play a clip from the final work, which is a duet-like, opponent-like relationship, where you see some speaking and performing where this agent-human relationship takes place. So this short clip even though, again, this is my specific hyperspecialism, what we're seeing more and more is an attempt to find these agent-human relationships for all expertise. And this piece from 2018, yes, it's an art film and it's an artistic expression, but what's really fascinating is it reached whole new demographics, individuals that don't normally have a relationship with the fact that these systems can have a self-development aspect. And I think that's the most important thing, is the storytelling allows to reach new audiences. So speaking of opposition, when it comes to collaboration, this is a project called Voice Gems. So Voice Gems is a 200,000 particle system which takes the features of, say, everybody in this room in their voice and uses that to sculpt the form and the color of that piece. So over the last 3 years, we've been developing what we call the 1,000-year archive. We've been collecting voices from all over the world, and as a new method of preservation, storing them on chain. And this has allowed partnerships with individuals like Jane Goodall, Ai Weiwei. We also did a series of assets with National Geographic from the voices of critically endangered species. And it's these kinds of collaborations where a technology, specifically blockchain, can take a very primal and fundamental idea around preservation, and then outside of the objectivity and the usefulness of the technology, it's fascinating what starts to happen when you actually introduce a new narrative, something that transmutes into the zeitgeist in a powerful and new way. So what we didn't expect to happen is when we started to release these digital gemstones, we started to receive hundreds of emails from people that had lost loved ones, people that are not crypto native or tech native, who have files and voice notes stored on their phone, a very unceremonial object, saying, can I house the laughter of my brother that is no longer here inside of a voice gem? Like, how do I know that I can keep this? How do I know that this will last? How do I know that I can give this to my grandchildren? And all of a sudden, the utilities of on-chain has this poetic narrative, which has an emotional response, and it clicks. There's this connection to a new demographic. So we started to continue that project. This piece that you see here, I think there's a little bit of audio, is actually a collective voice gem from hundreds of voices that we collected around the world, producing these large-scale sculptures, taking something that normally doesn't have form and re-representing it in a new way. But this piece is specifically interesting because what we thought was it was these bold voices, these vastly vulnerable voices that would have this new outreach, the largest connection, but is actually finding ways to add poetry with tech to preserve some of the smaller moments in life. So I just want you to listen to this clip.
Tell me your name.
Casey.
What's your name?
Casey.
Where did you go today?
Where are you?
You went to the zoo?
Yeah.
You went in the Wawa?
Yeah.
What animals did you see?
Penguin.
A penguin?
So this is a very simple conversation between a father and a daughter. And what we did is we isolated the daughter's voice and produced this gemstone. 2 years later, her voice has changed, it's developed. And to this day, he's realized that this is something that he has and he stores as a piece that effectively holds a moment in time. And I think the most fascinating, powerful narratives are when you can have an emerging piece of tech that are leveraged to very fundamental, traditional pillars of the human condition. And I think being able to remember in this way, this idea of leveraging obviously has an emotional reaction, but it has a practical, strategic contribution because it creates this engagement and it overcomes these sort of noisy narratives that can get in the way of innovation. It cuts through. So to continue our sort of approach, we wanted to be able to create multi-reality objects where not only are we producing these digital artifacts, this is actually not a render, this is a real physical, lab-grown, crystalline voice-generated form, which is a lot of words. And the idea of this was actually used to replace a real diamond engagement ring. So this was generated from the voice between lovers. It was minted after the proposal was successful, and the piece was actually showcased at the wedding. So There is the opportunity for new ceremony with digital experience. I think with really powerful storytelling, you're able to access minds, hearts, and just practical utility in a way that if you continue to follow or let the sort of noisy narratives perpetuate, I think you have a much larger challenge. So how are you collaborating with storytellers? What is the power of embracing not all artists, but really good creative direction, really good strategic storytelling? And if those narratives work, it just allows you to have a leverage, which I think is extremely powerful. So my name is Harry Yeff. I hope there's something in there that we can discuss and continue to explore. And I think I really commend and support the idea that there is a new breed of creative technologist that really contributes something very special to the market and to the world. Thank you.